that was an interesting episode. As always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review. I'm going to be talking about House of the Dragon episode 3, so if you haven't seen it, this will contain spoilers, but I'm going to do a bit of a non-spoilery chat beforehand. So yeah, we're on episode 3 of this show. And let's just get it out the way, am I going to compare this show to The Rings of Power as it just aired over the weekend there? And no, because I haven't done a Rings of Power review yet and I'm not sure that I will. But I did really enjoy the show, so, spoiler alert if I do that review in the future. But the reason I'm not comparing these two shows is I don't think it's particularly fair on either one. At least until we're at the end of the season. For me, they're both the same, but they're different. It's a bit like tea and coffee. It depends on what you're in the mood for. And if you don't like tea and coffee, just imagine McDonald's and Burger King. And if you don't eat meat, I'm not doing a third comparison, so just figure that one out and then let me know what you come up with in the comments below. So this episode seems to be building some stuff up. There's a lot going on here, but also not a lot at the same time. I'm kind of shocked, to be honest, about how little attention Matt Smith is getting in this show. He's not been in it in the second and third episodes anywhere near as much as I thought he was going to be. And this episode does focus more on the king and his daughter, and some changes that have occurred since the last episode. I can't really ruin too much without going into spoilers, but it's a sort of examination of where they're at in their relationship and the decision that he's made to make her queen now that things have changed. But yeah, a lot of interesting things in this episode, but certainly not the most interesting episode ever. So with that, I am going to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, this is your only warning. So we get another time jump, and this one is about 2 or 3 years. And this is a second time jump in 3 episodes, and no doubt that there is more to come. I'm going to talk a bit about that later on, but yeah, I've got some thoughts on that. And also the big bad that we were getting teased for the first 2 episodes, the Crab Eater. Now, I keep saying the Crab King, I'm sorry. And we get a dragon attack at the start as well, and these dragons really don't stick the landing, and you know what I mean if you've seen the episode, literally. But yeah, looking at this dragon, it doesn't look as fierce as Daenerys' dragons, especially when it comes to the fire shooting out its mouth. I don't know if they're maybe dying that down, because in the first season, or I should say the original show, Game of Thrones, they did mention that they domesticated the dragons so much that they were sort of close to being dogs. And I have mentioned that in my previous videos. I think the first one where the king and the queen sort of do seem to refer or treat dragons more as pets than like a weapon to be used or something that they respect. And I don't know if that's a conscious decision for the showmakers to make it seem a bit different, or it's just a different VFX company or something like that. So yeah, it's been a few years. The war that was getting set up at the end of the last episode has now been in full swing for quite a while, and Daemon is after the Crab King, and it's not going particularly well for them. They seem to have reached a sort of stalemate with them. They're in a no man's land situation, and they're getting a little bit desperate. But back in King's Landing, the king now has the son that he wants, because hey, there's been a 2 and a bit year time jump. And is this going to be an issue for viewers with all these time jumps? I don't know how long they're going to continue. I thought they would have stopped by this episode, but it seems that we're going to get them at least in the next one, and probably all the way up to episode 5. So I'm not sure how these jumps are so far benefiting the story and the viewers. I mean, if they didn't reference the time jumps, you wouldn't really notice it, and it is going to be a little bit disconcerting if it jumps another, like, say 5 years, because this baby will then be a little boy, or if it jumps 15 years, he'll almost be a man. But despite the fact that he's got the son that he wants, the baby hasn't been named heir yet. At the start of the episode, the king seems to be more interested in playing happy families than dealing with anything that's going on in the kingdom. especially when it comes to his brother and the war, because although Daemon is involved in the war, he hasn't dragged the crown into it yet, so none of the king's forces have got involved in this conflict. But yeah, the sort of chaos that we're used to in Game of Thrones is getting here. When we first met the king, you know, he was kind of happy, his wife was pregnant, he was expecting a son. That all went terribly wrong. His brother then pissed him off even more. But the chaos with this war and with what's going on with his family and who's going to be the next king or queen is certainly playing a much bigger role, and it seems to be on everyone's mind, or at least everyone's mind that's got power. But yeah, it's getting complicated. Rhaenyra has a little brother that could step over her to get the throne. And she's got a new stepmom and a new queen as well, which is also her best friend, or her ex-best friend. They don't really go too much into the dynamic of how the friendship has changed, because I suppose from their point of view it's been a few years, so they would know, but we didn't know. We've missed quite a bit. And the sort of King's Landing side of the story in this episode is all about the baby's birthday. So they're going to have a hunt and a tournament. And kings going in hunts in Game of Thrones doesn't traditionally end well. But I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, Rhaenyra just seems like she's plodding along with her life until she finally runs into a Lannister, and it's Jason Lannister, who is a twin, because reference to the other show. And the guy does seem like he has some grand designs for Rhaenyra, and he's not the only one in this episode. The king still does seem stuck in the idea of his daughter taking the throne, so anyone that's a suitor doesn't really see it from that way. They see it that the baby is going to be king and that they're just taking her off the king's hands as a sort of trade and alliance. But speaking of grand designs, Lord Hightower seems to have quite a few of his own. He wants Rhaenyra to marry her brother, which would solve a huge problem when it comes to who's going to be king and who's going to be queen, because it all works out. And before you go, they have mentioned that Targaryens have been doing this for centuries on and off. But it did occur to me in the first episode, why has no one suggested that she marry her uncle? That would solve another big problem. Hightower is really starting to become an interesting character in this show. Not as interesting as I would like, but he's certainly a guy that's covering all his bases. Because if this plan doesn't work out and the baby does become king, that's his grandson. So why wouldn't he want his grandson on the throne? Of course he does. He's quite happy to step on Rhaenyra to get it, and he wants his daughter as queen to step up and basically do his dirty work. And this isn't the only influence that Alicent can have. As I said, the war isn't going well for Daemon and they need help, but Big Brother the King doesn't want to step in until Alicent the Queen changes his mind. So is this foreshadowing about things that are going to happen later on with Alicent and the King? I think Hightower is going to be playing the King through his daughter. And it's hard to tell if she does genuinely have feelings for the king, or maybe she did have them and now they're gone, or maybe they weren't there and they have developed. But what I think is going to happen with Hightower is he's going to ask his daughter to do something that she doesn't want to do, or something that she thinks is not going to be beneficial. And when she says no and decides to go on her own path, that's when we're going to get a new Cersei Lannister on our hands. I know Alicent does seem a bit innocent and maybe a bit of a puppet at the moment, but once she realises the power that she wields, she's the second most influential person in this show in terms of power. And speaking of power, the king does admit that he named Rhaenyra to be king to stop Daemon rising to power, but he didn't see his second marriage and kids coming. So, because he's now got a son, and that's what he always wanted, Rhaenyra now sees herself as a bit of a gift to be traded off for marriage, like I said. She does get a bit of a love interest, but I don't know if I particularly see that panning out. In fact, if they're being technical, every guy wants to marry her, so they're all love interests. But now, I highly suspect that some people are going to say the time jumps are a little bit confusing and the pace of this episode is a little bit slow. And I kind of can't disagree with that. It's not going to be for everyone, but this show is leaning a bit more into what we're used to stylistically from Game of Thrones. I didn't think we were going to get any big battles in the first half of the series, or even in the series at all up until the last or the second last episode, but we do get quite a chunk of change when it comes to battles here. We really see what Daemon's capable of in the field, defeating the Crab Eater. But the whole scene where he goes out onto the beach and confronts him, I didn't think there was a particularly great energy to that. I mean, it didn't really feel exciting, but that's just for me. I don't think it was the action itself. I think it's more because of the fact of the time jumps that we've never really gotten to know the Crab Eater or what he's about or what he wants, and yeah, it's kind of hard to care about an enemy or a threat that you don't know anything about. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in the conflict. I did mention in my chat with Marcelo, which we're going to be trying doing weekly, that I posted earlier on today, that I thought this was going to be the case. And I think this is going to happen in the show a few more times as well, that we're going to maybe miss out key story elements in favour of the time jumps, and to be honest, I don't think it has the best impact for the flow of the show, but again, that's just me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But yeah, let's get back into the time jump. So as I said, that's 3 episodes and 2 time jumps, and there's going to be more to come with some characters aging up and being replaced by older actors, which we've seen in other shows. If you do watch The Crown, they do that as well, and they do it to great success in that show, at least in my opinion. But that's because The Crown do it between or over seasons, not in episodes. So I'm beginning to feel like, yeah, are we going to care about certain characters if they're getting replaced by actors all the time? Now, another sort of big storyline in this episode is the king going on the hunt. And I don't know about this, I feel strongly divided about this. There seemed to be an incredible sense of sort of dread or foreboding, or that something ominous was going to happen. Now, I don't know if that's them sort of referencing what happened to King. Now, I don't know if that's them referencing what happened to Robert, saying that it could happen to the series, but certainly, like, certain scenes, especially when he's going to kill the stag, you get the idea that this thing is just going to, you know, buck free and just stab him in the chest, like that's what happened to Robert Baratheon. And I think that the writers are relying too heavily on that. I mean, if they had killed him in that way, it just would have been a cop-out. And his whole sort of disease or rotting away thing isn't really addressed or mentioned in this episode as well. Let's say it's been 2 or 3 years and we didn't really get a strong update on what's going on with that. I don't think it's the last that we've seen of it, but again, I don't know if it is a genuine illness or it's something that someone is trying to inflict on the king. But the whole stag stuff for me just didn't really work. They could have done a lot more with the time in this episode. The first half is kind of very focused on Viserys, especially what other people want from him and how he feels about that. And just to step back a bit, is this going to be the last Lannister that we see? I sort of hope so, and that they don't rely on these famous houses that we've seen too much. We get a few more name checks of family houses that we're familiar with from the original show in this episode, but they've not really gone too deep into where these houses are at, who their alliances are, how strong that they are, because we know that houses are going to rise and fall, and there's going to be sort of, you know, highs and lows when it comes to power and battles and things. So I would like a little bit of information on what is going on and where everyone sits in terms of Westeros and loyalty to the king. Hopefully we're going to get that through the rest of the season. But all in all, not a bad episode, but certainly not a great one. I think most of the issues here for me are for the time jumps and a little bit with the writing. But at this point in Game of Thrones, we've been introduced to a lot more characters than we have in the show. It seems to be focusing on sort of core 6 or 8 characters, depending on your point of view. We haven't really had any interesting secondary characters yet, you know, like any Barristan Selmays or Littlefingers or things, but again, it is only the 3rd episode and this show is going to be a slow burner, so I hope that the B characters and the C characters are as well developed and as interesting as the original show. And yeah, I am still enjoying House of the Dragon and I'm going to keep watching it, and I'm going to keep watching The Rings of Power and enjoying that as well. If you want me to do a Rings of Power video, just let me know in the comments below, or you can contact me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. If you've made it this far, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing another chat with Marcelo that I'm going to post during the week as well. As always, I'm Al, thanks for watching.